I can't see you yet. Maybe, now I see you.
Okay, so I'm going to get out of the way so you can see everybody, and people are just going to basically ask you questions. And
Fine. You see me?
yes.
Great. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Let's do it in unison.
Who has the first question? Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
All right.
But I can't see you, though.
That's all right. I'm sure you know I'm a sentient human.
Move over a little bit. I'd like to see you.
Okay. Let's do it that way.
You might want to walk
Can
down.
you walk down here? Yeah. I'm going to have a line if you like.
Yeah.
How about
I
that?
can see from Jonathan to the clock in the back of the room. Nobody's moving anymore. It's sort of still. I don't know why you guys are moving around. Wait, it says the fall ended. Wow.
Can you hear us?
I'm here, I can hear you. It's just that I see a still picture and I don't see me. And usually I see you guys and me, but you guys are moving around, but it's just like a still picture of you.
Turn the camera off.
Okay, turn the camera off.
And also I have a message, call ended, duration 44 seconds. I don't know what happened.
We still hear you though.
Yeah, we still hear you, and we're there.
Well, it's up to you. You can start again or we can just go
That's
like
pretty
this.
techier than me, because it's not a simple
I'm
one.
gonna
give it a shot.
Right.
Let's restart.
Is that better?
Much better. Now I can see you.
All right. Thanks for being with us here today, Doctor. I have a question concerning free market environmentalism. I know that's a topic you've given quite a few lectures on, and I'm sort of following in your path, I guess. I'll be giving a few lectures here and there about the subject, loosely based on what you say and other sources. And I know you don't like to go into technicals and hypotheticals about things in particular situations, but one issue that's been giving me a lot of questions from people that I have trouble answering is riparian access and rights to rivers and the content thereof within the flow, and if there's a way to, solve that with the least amount of initial coercion as possible.
Well, first of all, I don't mind hypotheticals. I sort of thrive on hypotheticals, and I think what you have with rivers, the problem, take the Mississippi River, it's a long river, it's 3,000 miles long or 2,000 miles long or something like that. And the problem is that if you own a patch of river up near Chicago or somewhere, and I own a patch of river near, say, St. Louis, which is further down, if you put some crap in the water, it comes down a couple hundred miles and it hits me. So what you have is what Murray Rothbard called something, I forget the exact terminology, but you don't have the right level of ownership. That's not the right word. But the point is that you and I are now tied together like Siamese twins. You do something that affects me, I do something perhaps that affects you. We really can't be separate owners. We have to, instead of you owning a patch upriver and me owning a patch downriver and somebody else owning a patch further downriver, I think the much more reasonable way would be we all own the Mississippi River, and now there might be 100,000 people, and it's the Mississippi River Corporation, and we each own one share of it, and now the Mississippi River Corporation makes the rules for how the Mississippi River runs. It would be the same thing for highway, I don't know, the I-10 runs by me, or the I-55 runs north and south. If every different person owns 1 mile of it, and puts up a toll every mile, it's going to be a pain in the rear end. Much better would be to amalgamate and say that the I-10 or the I-55 is owned by one company composed of 100,000 shareholders, and they all elect the board of directors and they make the rules of the road. So I think rivers and roads, and also long, thin things, if I can extrapolate or make your questioning wider. There is the problem of long, thin things. What's the problem of long, thin things? Well, what are long, thin things first? One is rivers, another is roads. But then you get things like sewer pipes, or water pipes, or electric pipes, or gas lines, or even sanitation. You know, should we have 15 different garbage trucks come to our neighborhood, and each one of them has 1/15 of the clients? Now you have 15 big trucks running around? Or would we, as neighbors, be better off, yes, if we all agreed, let's have one garbage service, or one mail service, or one telephone line service. Nowadays, you don't need telephone lines, but in the old days before cell phones. So I think the answer to that question is, what time perspective do you look at? If you look at it from the time perspective where there are, say, 10,000 houses with no connections, no pipes, no nothing, then you have a real problem. This is a market failure, and the pinko economists are saying that this is a market failure. But if you look at it from the point of view of the guy who's building these 10,000 houses before they're built, he can build it in one of two ways. He can build it, each house is unconnected, no pipes, no sewer lines, no water lines, in which case nobody's going to be wanting to buy that house, or if they did, they'd pay a penny per house. Or he can say, look, I'm setting up sewer lines, I'm setting up telephone lines, I'm setting up pipes, this, roads, whatever, and you guys are now a condominium for these purposes. You're sort of stuck with the garbage service that I picked for 1 year. But if you don't like them after 1 year, you can vote for another one. You can vote for a different telephone line or something like that, and then the whole problem goes away. So I think the problem of long, thin things, whether it's telephone wires or electric wires or sewage or water or roads or rivers, if you look at it from that point, these 2 points of view, one, the ex ante and the ex post, and the other, you can't have each guy owning a little bit of something, but you have a group of people owning the whole thing. You internalize the externalities to go to economic jargon speak, and I think that would be the solution to your question.
Thank you.
Step right up, and what's fine. I feel like a bar.
A drink of knowledge. Okay, so you gave a very eloquent description of how we would deal with, say, the Mississippi River or a highway. As we are all citizens and civilians of Earth, how do we apply this as a worldwide thing? And if we do, don't we just run into the problem of the government that we have now? Of course.
Kick this guy out of the meeting. That's too tough a question. No, I'm kidding. I mean, if I was Ayn Rand, that's what I would do. I mean, she was sort of weird. I mean, she was great in some ways. It's kind of, you ask a tough question and you just get out. That's a very, very good question, a very challenging question, and let me deal with it under a rubric or two. One would be global warming. And another might be, what's that thing when the sun comes through and it screws us all, gives us cancer?
Ozone layer?
Greenhouse gases? Solar flare? Greenhouse?
Well, I'll think of it probably. Well, let's just take global warming. Now, in my view, possession is 9/10 of the law. The burden of proof is on anyone who wants to change anything. Otherwise, we assume whatever is extant is legitimate, but we are open to the burden of proof. Now, if it can be proved that by using underarm deodorants or air conditioners or whatever, you get these rays coming through.
CFCs.
I don't know why I can't think of that problem.
CFCs?
I'm sorry?
CFCs?
Yeah, I guess. Probably. Or if global warming really was a problem, then if I used an underarm deodorant or I had a carbon imprint, what would happen is I would kill you, in effect. It would be no different than is taking a gun and shooting you. And obviously libertarians don't do that. And then we would have to be part of a common ownership of the whole earth. The Gaia hypothesis would be right. Not that Gaia is a living creature, but that all 7 billion of us would have to have this company called Earth Incorporated, And Earth Incorporated would have to have rules about, you can't use air conditioners, you can't use coal or whatever it is. So if this were true, and this is a hypothetical, if this were true, then we would have to, for these purposes, not other purposes, and Mayor Bloomberg still couldn't tell us that we can't have sodas, and we still wouldn't have nanny state, we still have free enterprise in many other ways, in every other way. But in this way, we would have to have some sort of rules and regulations. Free market anarchists, such as myself, are not against rules, we favor rules, namely the rule of non-aggression, the non-aggression principle. And if these hypotheses were true, then we would have to have rules to stop you from, using coal, or me from using refrigerators, or whatever it is. However, the burden of true proof has not come anywhere near being met. The alternative hypothesis is that it's not the human beings that are heating up the Earth or creating these problems, it's solar flares. And then we also have problems of big asteroids coming after us, which might be more important than heating up the Earth by 3 degrees. If we can have more technology and stop some gigantic asteroid from hitting us, it might be a better way to safeguard us than by worrying about cigarette smoke or whatever. Not only hasn't the burden of proof even been come close to being met, but that there's not even a debate, not a fair debate. Because a fair debate is one where each person can speak and the other guy can speak and be based on evidence. But the ways these guys are doing it, they've got this thing called ClimateGate, where the leaders of the global warming hypothesis are plotting and scheming to make sure that other scientists who have different views are not heard. And then they use the word denier, as in Holocaust denier. I mean, once you start doing that and you start trying to ruin people's careers, they're no longer seeking out the truth. What they're doing is trying to, promulgate their views, perpetrate their views on us. So I would say they've come nowhere near to proving their case. They're not even trying to prove their case. They're trying to ram their case down our throats. But if they could prove it beyond a reasonable doubt or whatever, then we would have to modify libertarian legal code in a way that incorporates that.
Thank you very much.
Get out. Now get out.
Hi, Dr. Block. I listened to one of your lectures on YouTube about how you believe that Federal Reserve banking wouldn't be allowed in a free market society, and I would like you to elaborate on how you believe the financial system would work in a free market society.
Before I do it, if I could get in a little free advertising, I noticed that several of you are young people of college age, and I'd like to try to recruit some of you to come study with me at Loyola University. Not just to study with me, but it just so happens that all 5 of us in my economics department, me and the other 4, are all Austro-libertarian free market people, which is very rare. Most places you're going to go to, you're going to go to Keynesian or a
Dr. Block, you're not trying to steal my students, are you?
Who is that?
I'm sorry, this is Dr. Cooch. I organized the conference. So that's okay. Go right ahead.
What university do you teach at?
Stephen F. Austin, Soria. This is where we're at here.
Well, how many free market economists do you have in your school?
I think you probably have us beat, but we do have a couple here.
Well, a couple is magnificent. Most have none, like the next door Tulane, which is 3 times the size of us. They've got about 17,000 students. We've got about 5,000. There's only one professor who's vaguely free market. He's more than vaguely free market, Eric Mack, but he's in philosophy, not economics. In addition to having 5 people in our economics department, we have Nick Capaldi, who is business ethics, who's a free marketer. We have Stuart Wood in finance, who is a student of Ezra Kerzner. We've got 2 or 3 professors in law school. So most universities have either got none or one, and we've got maybe almost a dozen people who are really free market. So if you're thinking, getting sick of your schools, shoving Keynesianism and Marxism down your throat, I mean, we've got plenty of Marxists too in our sociology department. So you will get the common view, but you'll at least get a free enterprise view. Okay, now with that advertisement off the board, let me talk about the monetary system and the Fed and how would the market work and what about fractional reserve banking. Well, the way I see it, and I get my views on this, is I get my views on many other things from Eric Rothbard and Mises and Menger as an Austrian economist. Just as we would want to have separation of church and state, separation of education and state, separation of pretty much everything in state, we would also want to have separation of money in state. So how would the money work? Well, some people would mine gold or silver, and other people would turn it into coins, and other people would deposit them in banks, 100% banks, and we would conduct business in that way. We wouldn't have any Fed which messes around with interest rates, which artificially lowers interest rates and creates the Austrian business cycle. We wouldn't have rampant inflation. We would have a much more sound economy, and there's no room for any government involvement in the financial field as far as I can see. Now let me just talk just a little bit about fractional reserve banking, because that's more divisive within the libertarian movement. There are libertarian Austrians such as Larry White and George Selgin and a few others who take the view that it should be legal and wouldn't be a problem. Well, the way I see it, suppose what's your name, the young man who asked me the question?
Blake.
I can't hear you.
Blake.
Blake?
Yes.
Blake, okay, Blake, you deposit $100 in my bank. And what happens is I'm a reserve banker. I have demand deposits, and I give you a checkbook. And you deposit $100 or 100 gold coins or whatever it was. And what I do is I give you a demand deposit for 100. So anytime you can come to my bank and get the 100. And then what I do is I turn around to the guy from who had the microphone, who doesn't want me to steal his students. What I do is I lend out $90 to him. And I give him a demand deposit too. And I keep 10. And what I'm hoping, right now I've got $190 outstanding against me. If you both come to me and say, well, you say, Blake, I want my 100, the professor says he wants his 90, all I've got is 10. And then you get into that movie, It's a Perfect Life, not a Perfect Life. What is it?
Wonderful life.
It's a Perfect Life, where you had a bank run and then the guy just didn't have enough money to give all the depositors the money. Well, that's no way to run a railroad, to mix my metaphors. This is just, what I do is I created money out of thin air. We started with 100 and now it's 190. And if some other bank lends out that 90 and we keep the fraction of 10%, they'll lend out 81 or something. And with a fraction of 10%, you get tenfold. And we're going to get $1,000 worth of money out of this $100 deposit. You have vast inflation. And it also has, implications for wealth distribution, because the first people that get the money are bankers or cronies or Wall Street types, and then prices go up a little bit, and prices keep going up as the money percolates throughout the economy, and the proverbial widows and orphans and people on fixed incomes get it. They never get it, or prices rise long before they get it, so you're taking money away from poor people on fixed incomes and giving it to rich people, so you have that problem. So I think that the fractional reserve banking would be prohibited by law in a truly free society, and I don't care that people agree upon it. Just because you agree on something doesn't make it compatible with the non-aggression principle or logical. We could agree, to have a murder incorporated in something, and we both agree it's still an invalid contract. Another invalid contract would be to sell or buy a pink elephant because there are no pink elephants, or square circles. There are none and there can't be any. So just because people agree to something doesn't mean that it's legitimate. There's something more important for libertarians than mere contract. That's private property rights. Private property rights underlie contracts. Contracts are just ways of dispersing or reorganizing property rights. The property rights are the key. And you can't have any more property rights to things than there are things. And it used to be that we had a property rights to 100, and now there are property rights to 190. You have an overdetermination of property rights. The point of property rights is to distinguish mine from thine. Like I'm wearing this blue shirt, you're wearing a white shirt. I can't grab your shirt, you can't grab my shirt without permission. But suppose right now we have two shirts between the two of us, and there were titles to two shirts between the two of us. But suppose there were titles to 5 shirts and only 2 shirts. Well, you have some sort of contradiction. You have a conflict in rights, and what is it? The girl in the movie has a cross, and the vampire runs away from it. Well, libertarians run away from overdetermination of rights. If you have more property titles than there are things, well, then you have necessary conflict, and you're out of the libertarian movement, or out of libertarian philosophy. So I hope that answered your question.
Hey, Dr. Block, David Johnson here. How you doing?
Hi.
Hey, speaking of decentralized voluntary currencies, I just wanted to pass on some good news. You may have heard I bought your book, Indefensible Truth with Bitcoin, and the price was $15 at the time, and now it's worth $62. So I hope you'll be letting everybody pay you Bitcoin and collecting the vast wealth as a result.
Okay. Yeah, I remember in Houston, you bought my book, Defending the Undefendable, for 15 Bitcoins or something. I still don't know how to cash it in, but I'll figure it out. Let me answer the question about Bitcoins. Are Bitcoins legitimate or not? I'm an Austrian economist. I'm a Mengerian in this, and I think that money has to be created through some sort of process where it's based on things that are of wealth, like gold or silver or whatever. So I'm not really in favor of Bitcoin. The question, though, is, even though I now own 63 of them, thanks to you, the question, there are 2 questions. One question is, 2 questions. One, is it a violation of the libertarian code to have it? And I think not. I think it's a voluntary interaction, and it's not a violation. I don't think we should put any Bitcoin people in jail, but I do think we should put fractional reserve people in jail. That's a different issue. When we have our libertarian Nuremberg trial, it's going to go up. So I don't think that Bitcoins are improper, legally speaking. You know, there's a joke. One economist asked the other economist, well, how's your wife? And the answer is, compare to what? It's supposed to be a joke. The point is, what are we comparing Bitcoins to? If we're comparing Bitcoins to a gold standard, a silver standard, or something that emanated through the market in this appropriate way, then Bitcoins are bad. But if you're comparing Bitcoins to fractional reserve fiat currency of the government, well, you know, Bitcoin's starting to look a lot better. So if I had a pick, I'd probably pick Bitcoins over the present situation, even though I don't think Bitcoins will take over. I think I've got my money, so to speak, on gold.
Anybody else?
Have another question for Dr. Watt?
Mr. Bach, this is my first introduction to you. My name is Shay Howard, not Shay Guevara, but I live in this right-to-work state, and I'm an aspiring filmmaker who aspires to really a union job in the industry, because that's where the pay is. And I appreciate the standard of professionalism in the union. But it seems like unions are getting such a bad rap these days. I just wonder what the libertarian attitude is towards unions, and are they just too big?
Well, let me, Baker's dozen, 13 instead of 12, not only unions, but also right-to-work states. What's the libertarian view on both? Now, the libertarian view on unions is complicated because there are 2 types of unions, or at least theoretically, hypothetically, there are 2 types of unions. Or, put it another way, unions, as we now know them, do 2 things. One of which is totally legitimate, and the other is totally illegitimate. So if they just stick to the legitimate one, libertarians support, well, I wouldn't say support unions, I would just say think that unions should be legal. You know, like when we say that we want to legalize marijuana, we don't say that we want to use marijuana. There's a distinction between favoring the use of and favoring the legalization of. So if the union just stuck to legitimate stuff, then the libertarian view of it, as far as I can see, would be that it should be legal. On the other hand, if they do the bad thing, then they should be prohibited by law. It shouldn't allow it. So what are the good thing and what is the bad thing? And the good thing is, if an individual, if one person comes to the boss and says, hey boss, you're paying me $10 an hour, I need $12 an hour, otherwise I quit. The boss is likely to say, don't let the door hit you on your backside on your way out, goodbye. On the other hand, if you go to the boss and say, I represent all 500 workers, and in their behalf, I'm saying that if you don't raise us from $10 to $12 an hour, we're all leaving. Now the boss has to say, whoa, if they all leave, I've got contracts. I'm supposed to deliver goods from my factory, and right now I've got 500 people. They're not perfect. There's always some problems, but at least they work together. I'm not going to have to train 500 new people. He's more likely to say yes. Now, in the early days of antitrust, the Sherman Act prohibited this sort of mass quit on the grounds of restraint or trade or something like that. But, the only problem with slavery was that you couldn't quit. Otherwise slavery wasn't so bad. You could pick cotton, rule, and you could sing songs, and they always couldn't quit. If you could quit, then slavery would have been, pretty innocuous. It's sort of like sadomasochism. Some people like it, but they can quit. So if an individual has a right to quit a job, does he lose that right when the other 499 people quit? No. You can all quit together. The right to quit is, part of free association. That's the essence for libertarians of free association, that it should all be by consent. We shouldn't be compelled to do anything unless we've agreed to do it and we're just upholding the contract. So if the union limited itself to just mass quits, that would be fine. They would be legitimate organizations, and libertarians would have no problem with them. Some of us might support them and be in a union, others might not. That would be a different issue, sort of like vanilla ice cream. Not everybody likes vanilla ice cream, but vanilla ice cream should certainly be legal. However, unions do something else too. In addition to this legitimate or valid activity, they do one other thing, which is totally invalid, and what they do is they try to prevent the employer from hiring other workers. So let's get back to the scenario. You came into my office, I'm the boss, you're the worker, and the other people in the audience are all workers, and you say, give us $12 an hour or $2 an hour raise. We're all walking. And I say, well, good luck in your next employment. And you say, well, you don't understand. What we're going to do is set up a picket line, and we're not going to allow any trucks to come in or to come out, and anyone else you try to hire, we're going to beat the crap out of them. We're going to call them scabs, which seems to be hateful, and the hate law should be against it, but they're not for some reason. And we're going to prevent you from hiring alternative workers, or scabs. Well, now that's a violation of rights, because you don't have a job, you don't have a right to a job. It's not your job. The scabs are not stealing something from you like your coat or your hat. The scabs are not taking your jobs away from you, because the job is just an embodiment of an agreement, and we no longer have an agreement. We agreed for $10, we don't agree for $12, so you can't do that. Or you may not. Let me give you an analogy. Now, if a man and a wife get a divorce, it's not a happy situation. They got married, they had a wedding, they had their families, everybody wished them luck, and now all of a sudden they're going, not a happy situation. But libertarians would allow for that, because unless the contract was for life. But suppose what the husband did is he said, okay, not only am I divorcing you, but I'm going to surround your house with my friends, and any other man you try to date, we're going to beat the living crap out of them. That would not be legitimate. And yet that's exactly what unions are doing. So if I can make an analogy from marital situation to labor markets, it's the same thing for libertarians. Libertarian view is, anything between consenting adults. So, are there any legitimate unions? Are there any unions that adhere strictly to the non-aggression principle? I once did some research on this. I was in Canada, and there was this thing called CLAC, C-L-A-C, Christian Labor Association of Canada. And I said to them, well, would your union engage in a mass quit if you didn't get what you wanted from the boss, whether a raise in income or better working conditions or whatever? He said, yeah. I said, well, would you then surround his building and not allow scabs in or trucks in or out. Oh, no, we're Christians, turn the other cheek, we would never do that. Then I asked the $64,000 question, well, what about labor union legislation that doesn't require you to surround his buildings with pickets, but rather compels him to deal with you, compels him to bargain fairly with you? Do you support labor union legislation of the sort of the Taft-Hartley and the other labor union legislation? And unfortunately, they said yes. If they would have said no, I would have said there's one legitimate union in North America. But you see, if the law compels the employer to bargain with you, then it's an illegitimate law. And if the union, and they all do, then there are no legitimate unions. So I think now comes the question, well, should you join a union if that's the only way to get a job? And I would say this is a very, very tough question. This is a very radical question. Let me make an analogy. Should you become a Nazi concentration camp guard? This is a serious thing for a libertarian. Suppose the following, you know, the guy before said he doesn't like hypotheticals, or you think I like hypotheticals? I like hypotheticals. So here's the deal. Right now, every Nazi concentration camp guard kills 100 people a day. Jews, blacks, gays, Romani, whatever. 100 people a day. But this is a libertarian. He's going to go become a Nazi concentration camp guard, but he's only going to kill 90 people a day. Why is he going to kill 90? Well, he has got to kill some, otherwise they'll have. And I'm assuming that if he kills 90, he'll pass, and no one will find out that he's a libertarian Nazi concentration camp guard. And now, at the end of the week, he's killed, I don't know, 9 times 7, 630 people, but saved 70 people. And now the libertarian, what do you call it, Nuremberg trial comes, and now he's on the dock. Is he guilty of murder? Yes. He killed 70 innocent people. Should we execute him? Well, this depends on what the heirs of the victims say. If he make a plea to the heirs of the victims, he can say, look, you know, I wish I could have saved your relatives, but I can only save 10 out of 100. And let's suppose that God's eye view that there's no dispute as to the facts. If all the heirs of the victims say, well, you know, you're a hero, we don't want to kill you because you did save 70 people that week, it's true you killed 630, but they would have died anyway, well then, what the heck? But if there's one person who says, well, I don't care, you killed my granddad or whoever it was, my child, and I want you executed, let's say that's the libertarian punishment theory, well then you go to the guillotine, or you get executed because you killed somebody. But first we libertarians hold a ticker tape parade in your honor, because you're a hero, because you saved innocent lives. Well, joining a union isn't quite as, I mean, Nazi concentration camp, but it's close, no. Say to you is, go join the union and then take 1% or 5% or 10% of the additional amount of money that you make from being in the union, or maybe half of that or something, not half of your salary, but half of the increase in salary that you get from being in the union over and above, and contribute to, I don't know what, the Ron Paul, the Libertarian Party, the Mises Institute, the organization that's putting on this group, the Free State Project, any of the libertarian groups. That would be roughly my answer. It's sort of predicated on something that occurred in the movie Gandhi, when some guy said, I forget which side he was on, Pakistani or Indian, he said, I killed a young man of the other side. And what Gandhi said is, go and adopt someone like that and raise him in his own religion as a way of making amends. So I think that joining a union is bad. I think, you know, if that's what you do, if you choose to do it, I would absolve you and say that you're really not that bad, and, you know, it should concern movement. Let me now answer about right to work. And then I'll call on you to have a follow-up question if you want. What is the state? Right to work. I would say Rand Paul is wrong on this, and he's wrong on a few other things too. He's not as good a libertarian as that. Here's a hypothetical. I now, you guys in the audience are now all my workers, and I'm the owner, and Ben and Jerry's ice cream company, you know, the sort of progressive types, or Michael Moore Incorporated. I'm Michael Moore. I have a bigger belly than I have. And one is a union shop. I want new employees, any new employees that I hire, I want you to approve of them, and I don't want any that you don't approve of, and I now have a contract with you. Is this a valid contract? Sure, it's a valid contract, assuming that the Ben & Jerry's ice cream isn't a criminal or anything like that. But in a right to work state, that would be a violation of the law. The law. So I'm against right to work. I mean, right to work legislation is second best. But the ideal point of view is to not have right to work, is to take away from their illegitimate powers, the powers that are conferred on them by legislation or that they seize by setting up picket lines. So that would be my 5-minute answer. Do you have a follow-up question?
Well, my question was inspired by your illustration that resources can be shared, like the river. And you know, my work, I don't have enough clout as an individual to bargain with my boss, and so I just really appreciate that because I'm going to be in competition with all those scabs. You know, I appreciate the idea of collective bargaining. You know, for my work, my collective bargaining with my boss for my professional level of work.
Well, you know, there are some libertarians who I think mistakenly label collectivism as the enemy. I'm not against collectivism. I'm not against collective bargaining as long as it's agreed upon and it's voluntary, and you don't beat up other people and scabs and stuff like that. Look, if you're really against collectivism, you have to favor individual sports. You can't favor team sports. I mean, like an individual race is individualistic, but say a basketball team, it's a team game, and if you're really an individualist vis-a-vis a collectivist, you can't favor team sports. And I favor team sports or individual sports. So I agree with you on collective bargaining, but the union should not be allowed to beat up scabs that the employer wants to hire if it doesn't want to hire you.
Hi, my name is Joseph. We've actually met before at the Mises Institute for Mises University, 2011. My question to you, most of us know about the Austrian business cycle theory already. I was wondering if you could maybe briefly explain the competing theories of the business cycle. For example, the new classical business cycle theory is probably something to do with technological shocks, probably the most ridiculous one, and the Keynesian theory of the business cycle, and why you disagree with those alternative theories.
Well, let me just say a minute on the Austrian business cycle theory. What the Austrian business cycle theory says is that when the government or the Fed artificially lowers interest rates, what they do is they encourage long-term investments, more long-term investments than the savings and consumption ratios of the populace would justify. And these long-term investments have to be dealt with at some point because they can't keep inflating, otherwise there'll be crack up inflation, hyperinflation. The Keynesian view is that it's not a matter of the allocation of resources, as is the Austrian view. The Keynesian view is that it's a lack of aggregate demand, that consumption takes you so far and then investment takes you a little further, and if the market does not have enough expenditure to create full employment, well then you have to have the government get just the right amount of expenditure. The problem with this is stagflation. For the Keynesians, the economy is sort of like a car, and you're driving along the road, and on one side is inflation, on the other side is unemployment. And the economy got a sort of a loose steering wheel, and it's liable to go into the ditch on either side. And what the government's got to do is steer the wheel a little bit better. And if the economy goes off in this direction, we'll have inflation. And then what should happen is the government spends less. On the other hand, if the car steers off into the other ditch, and we have unemployment, well then the government's got to spend more. But what about stagflation? What about a case where you have both inflation and unemployment? And what do you do? Murray Rothbard once asked his teacher at Columbia, who is the head of the Fed, Burns, Arthur Burns, he asked him this as a hypothetical. And Burns said, oh, that'll never happen. If it ever happens, we'll all have to resign. No, these guys, they should resign because we've got inflation and we've got unemployment. The problem with the Keynesian view is, as we know from basic economics 101, if you have unemployment, if wages are too high. If wages are a little bit lower, all the people could become employed. Now, I'm abstracting from the business cycle theory. If you're producing a business cycle, even the wages might have to be negative in order to create the employment. But you know, the way FDR and Hoover were trying to solve the problem is by raising wages. And that's what Obama's doing. He's trying to raise minimum wage from $7.25 to $9 or $10 an hour. And he wants to cure unemployment that way. I mean, that just exacerbates unemployment. Now, there's this gal from Massachusetts, Warren, Senator Warren, who's talking about, Elizabeth Warren, thanks, who's talking about a $22 an hour minimum wage, or maybe even
It's like productivity. She says it should be $22.
yeah, if it was 22, or she's even talking about $33 an hour. The point is that whatever the level the minimum wage law is set at, anyone with productivity below that is going to be unemployed. Because look, let's take the $7.25 minimum wage right now. Suppose I'm only worth $5 an hour because of low productivity, whatever, I have my troubles, but I'm worth $5 an hour, and the minimum wage law is $7.25. Well, anyone hiring me loses $2.25. So either they're not going to hire me, or if they hire me, they're going to go out of business, in which case they're not going to hire me anymore, and I'm unemployed. Look, the unemployment rate, supposed unemployment rate of the national unemployment rate is like 8.8% or 7.8% or something like that. The shadow statistics have it almost double, 14%. But the unemployment rate for black male teenagers is like 45%. And I mention them because their level of unemployment, their level of productivity is very low. In many cases, below 7.25. So when you raise it to 9, it's going to just make it worse. I don't know that I've done full justice to your question, but that's my response.
Thank you, Dr. Block. We have one more question for you.
Hey.
Hi, my name is Carl Swans from the Renegade Variety Hour podcast. I'm going to ask a totally simple, non-controversial question. So if the non-aggression principle is to be taken as fact, as a natural result of the axiom of self-ownership, shouldn't it be applied to those who are most defenseless, i.e. children?
Yeah.
That's a pretty simple one, but basically, do you take the stance that if a parent is negligent to their child or hits their child in the form of spanking, would that be going against the axiom of the non-aggressive principle?
No, there are libertarians who say spanking is per se a violation of the non-aggression principle, and I don't go along with that. I think what we really have when we talk about the non-aggression principle is we talk about consenting adults. Children are a challenge for every political philosophy. Like, look, if what you're saying is true, then we shouldn't have statutory rape laws. You know, I want to go to bed with a 5-year-old girl, and I say, hey girl, you want to come to bed with me? I'll give you a lollipop, and she says, sure. Even though
okay, so you're not allowed to have sex with 5-year-olds, okay, but that doesn't mean that you should be allowed to be able to hit 5-year-olds. I don't see how that makes any sense.
well, give me enough rope to hang me. See, what you're saying is the way I interpret what you're saying is we should treat children like adults. Namely, if you shouldn't be able to hit an adult without their permission. And in a boxing ring, if you and I get in a boxing ring, you punch me in the chin, I can't say, oh, assault and battery, because we agreed to be hit above the belt to each other. So forgetting about that, if I just haul off and punch you in the nose, that's a per se violation of rights. And what you're saying is that since libertarians agree with the non-aggression principle for adults, let's apply it to children. And I said, you can't apply it to children, because if you applied it to children, then you couldn't have statutory rape laws. And I think we should have statutory rape laws, because when I go to bed with this 5-year-old girl, I haven't initiated any violence against her. She agreed. And yet I still think it's wrong. So what I'm trying to say is that children are different. You have to treat children differently. I have a son and a daughter. They're now in their 30s, but especially my son, when he was 3 years old, he wanted to do all sorts of weird things that I didn't want to do, and the only way to stop him was to spank him. And, now, we're not talking about child abuse, we're not talking about, really hurting, but, a little spank. Like, he would like to throw sand in his little sister's eyes, and I wanted to throw a little sand in his eyes just to show him how it felt, even though throwing sand in someone's eyes is a violation of the non-aggression principle. My wife said, you better not do that, or she's bigger than me, so I couldn't do it. But I wanted to do that, and on other occasions I spanked them. Not to hurt them, but to teach them not to play in traffic or things like that. So the problem with your view that we should treat children just like adults is that it founders on the consent laws. If children are to be treated just like adults, then we can't have statutory rape laws, because look, if you go to bed with a 25-year-old girl or woman, you can't, that's not physical abuse, but you do the same thing with a 5-year-old girl, it is abuse even though she consented to it. The point is, she can't consent, she's not old enough to consent. Children are not like adults, they can't consent. Well, if they're not like adults in that context, well, then they're not like adults in this other context. Now, let's take the spanking a little further. Suppose I saw you at the edge of a bridge, ready to jump to your death. And what I did was I grabbed you, which is assault and battery, and then I kidnapped you, and I said, look, life isn't that bad, and I try to deprogram you out of suicide. Well, if I did that, I would be sort of like the Nazi concentration camp, because now I am engaging in abuse against you. You're an adult, and I should be punished for that. I would probably do it anyway, because, it's sort of nice to keep people alive. But the point, I guess I'm getting a little off the point. My bottom line on this spanking children is that for every political philosophy, children are different. And in libertarian philosophy, children are different. And I think that loving spanking, and that's not a contradiction in terms, can help the child, keep the child alive. The key for me is to be a good parent. And a good parent is someone who promotes the life of the child, and if the child will die because the child is too stupid to know not to play in traffic, and the only way you can keep him out of traffic is to spank him, I say spanking him, and you're not guilty of any crime.
All right, well, you certainly put to bed any notion that you don't like hypotheticals, I think.